In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use Dev Proxy to simulate responses to actions in Logic App Standard. So this Logic App that we have here, it's just a very simple HTTP request trigger. It's going to do a few things. It's going to get an item from a SharePoint list. This is a site that already exists, and I've already got a connection set up for it. We are also then going to make a HTTP request to this endpoint here, get some data, and this HTTP action's configured with OAuth configuration as well. And that's going to return a 200 response. In the next action, we've got a HTTP request. Again, exactly the same as the previous one, but this time we're actually going to return a 500, and then we're going to handle the response. So the same API, using the same configuration, but it's going to basically exert different behavior, and we're going to force that. So first of all, I'm just going to run this. So let's start the functions runtime. Let's just see what happens when I run this directly in Logic Apps. Okay, so everything should be running. Let's go to the overview and let's trigger the function. Okay, of course, it's going to fail. So let's look at the output. So we can see that we've got our item from SharePoint. So we've got the title here, Katoso Quad. That's the item, the product item that we're returning. And then our OAuth call, our HTTP call has failed. It's actually failed at the authentication stage. Like, hey, I can't find a tenant called my tenant. Okay, so it's just going to fail and it doesn't actually get to the next stage. So let's just stop this for a second and let's start Dev Proxy and see what happens. Let's start Dev Proxy. Dev Proxy is now running. Let's close this and let's start the Logic app again. That's just building and getting ready. Okay, great. That's now running. So let's run the trigger again. And this time we still see that we have one error, and that the actual Logic app ends in failure. However, let's go and take a look at the run. This one. So we can see we've got different behaviors here. So we've got the item from SharePoint. We've called the API. So we've had a success here, but then we've had a failure in the next step, which is exactly what we wanted because that was the scenario that we wanted to test for. So first, let's look at SharePoint. So if we have a look in here, we can now see that the title's different. We've actually got mocked in here. If we look at the API call, we can see that the authentication actually succeeded and we made a request and we got a response. And in the third action in here, we can see that we actually got a failure response, but we can actually see again, it's gone through the authentication and the failure has come from the response from the API, which is internal server error. Now, if we go back to our terminal and we look at Dev Proxy, we can see that Dev Proxy has been doing things in the background. So we've got some requests in here. So we've got the actual line for the request, which was the URL that triggered a behavior. So here is the request that's made to SharePoint. So this is the SharePoint connector that's sending this request, and we've mocked this. So we've using Dev Proxy configuration gone, we know about this URL and we're going to send a response back. The next step is our first HTTP request. So we have a request that's made to login.microsoftonline.com. So this is passing our client IDs, client secrets, and getting a token back. So we've mocked the token response, and then our API API response has also been mocked as well to return that 200. Then for the next action, we've taken the same approach. We're mocking the request to get the token, but this time instead of success, we're just mocking an error as well. So we're returning a 500. Okay, so what all happened here? What happened when I ran Dev Proxy? When I ran Dev Proxy used a configuration file, which is called devproxy.rc.json. So this is a configuration file. The configuration file basically tells the Dev Proxy runtime, here are the behaviors that I want you to exert. So if you think of a plugin as like a behavior, you're not far off. And each plugin has some configuration that you can give it. But globally, we have some URLs to watch as well. Now, this array here is basically saying if you see anything go over the network that kind of matches this URL, then I want you to do something with it. So here we have our wildcarded URL for the SharePoint request. So we can use wildcards in here, which is really useful because we don't know what the IDs of the servers are going to be. They could be in different regions, so we can asterisk those. And we also maybe just want to look at the host name. We don't need all the list IDs here, so we can just put a star and say anything that follows this we want to match. Same with our local server, our fake server, in fact, and also the login.microsoftonline.com domain as well. So we've got this configuration here, so mocks response plugin, and the configuration points to a mocks file. So if we go to the Dev Proxy folder and we look at the mocks file, in here we can see that we've got a number of requests. So it's a single array with some mocks in here. If we look at the first one, so it's split between request and response. In here, this is saying that when you see the first request that's made to this endpoint, I want you to return with a 200, which is what we saw. The next mock is if you don't match on this first one, so after the first request, then you're going to send a 500 back every single time. So every subsequent request is going to be this error. So this is how we get the error in the second stage. We've also got a mock for the token, obtaining the token. So here we've used the asterisk again to just kind of genericize the URL, because this could be a different tenant, maybe using different environments and things. But this is just returning back an access token. It's just a fake one at the moment, but it's a valid response. Our next request is something a little bit more complex, but all this is just the response from SharePoint. So again, we've used the asterisks here to make sure that we're genericizing it as well. Let's say you're using a different environment, you've got different IDs, we want to get rid of those. But in here, we can send back the status code and the body. Here's where I can change the title to be mocked. Now, this looks pretty complex, and you're probably thinking at the moment, oh, I don't really want to handcraft these responses all the time. Well, there's a nice little utility in Dev Proxy, another plugin, and you can create a configuration file to generate the mocks from the requests that are actually sent over the wire. So here is another configuration file. It just has one plugin. So this is the mock generator plugin, and it's only looking at these requests. So I use this just for the SharePoint request. And if I stop Dev Proxy, I can pass in a configuration file. So when I pass in this configuration, it's going to run Dev Proxy with this configuration, and we have the ability to record. So I can press the R key, which sets it into recording mode. So from this point on, any request that's made to this URL and it matches, Dev Proxy will record the response. And when I stop recording, which I'm doing stop now, I'm not sending a request, so there's nothing to create. A file will be created with a random value, but in there will be the actual bodies of the requests, the same as what is in here. So you can use that and copy and paste, modify it however you need it to be. But it's nice that if you just want to say, okay, I've got all my data set up, but maybe I give this to another developer who then, like, do we want the next developer to have to set up this SharePoint site? Do they just need to, they might be working on a different part of the Logic app. They don't really care about setting all that up. They could just use Dev Proxy to simulate that response, then get to the next stages. Now, one of the things which was really nice here is that we've got our call to our fake API. So that's going to, if we back to the configuration file, that's going to like this myserver.com/API, and this doesn't exist, right? So all we're doing is just using the mocks to kind of stand up our own API. And this might be really useful in scenarios where maybe you need an API as part of your integrations, but you've not quite got the skills to build that API. Maybe you're waiting for a developer to come off another project. This way, you can come into the configuration in Dev Proxy and just easily stand up a mock. Or we've also got additional features as well, where we've got a CRUD API, which is, it goes beyond mocking, where you have your own kind of like in-memory database. So you can make updates, you can do deletes, and you can really simulate, a real-world API, add Entra authentication to it as well. That's going a little bit further than where I wanted to, but if you want to find out a bit more about Dev Proxy, just go to aka.ms/Dev Proxy. Here you'll find all of our documentation. In here, we've got lots of how-to guides and tutorials of how to get started. So things like simulating errors. You can also do random errors as well. So rather than just having a static mock, you can have a collection of errors that you want to send back to particular requests, which is really useful if you just want to, kind of throw a load of errors and test your Logic apps for resilience, test different branches for different error states that you might want to test for. So if I just close Dev Proxy here, so Dev Proxy, you can easily get a hold of it by going to Winget. So if you search for Dev Proxy in Winget, you see we've got two versions. So we have our stable version and our beta version. We generally try and release every couple of months, but we do have a beta in there for some of the new features that will be coming in the next version. So if you want to install it, dead easy, just use Microsoft Dev Proxy identifier. It's also available on Mac OS as well, so you can get that from Homebrew. You can also install it and use it on Linux as well. So just to recap, we use Dev Proxy here to simulate a response from a SharePoint connector, a HTTP connector using OAuth with a good response, and also with an error response, and then capture that as the error. So hopefully that was useful. Got any questions? Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay, thank you for listening.